Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to section 7.2. And in this section, we're going to be learning two new concepts of the Laplace transform. One of them being the inverse Laplace transform, and the other being how to Laplace transform derivatives of a function. So the two learning objectives for this section are going to be define and apply the inverse Laplace transform. And we're going to be able to solve initial value problems, meaning, differential equations using the Laplace transform and the inverse Laplace transform together. Okay, so let's introduce what the inverse Laplace transform is and recap a couple things before we go through some examples, okay? So in this section, we take a few small steps into how the Laplace transform can be used to solve certain types of equations for an unknown function. And we begin by observing the inverse Laplace transform. So we are essentially working backwards. We're given a Laplace transform already, and the inverse Laplace transform gives us what the original function f of t would be. So in a way, we are working backwards. Okay. So we're gonna then see how using both the Laplace transform and the inverse Laplace transform will help us be able to solve initial value problems, you know, IVPs. But what are IVPs? They are essentially differential equations. Okay, so the Laplace transform and its inverse is going to help us solve some differential equations. So it's a new method we're learning to solving a differential equation. Okay, so let's go ahead and define what an inverse Laplace transform is. So here's a definition. So if we have a function f of s, which is already a Laplace transform, right? Laplace transform of a function of t equals a function of s. We say that f of t, the original function, is the inverse Laplace transform of f of s, the Laplace function. And what we write is f of t equals Laplace inverse, c raised to the -1, f of s. Okay, so that is what the inverse Laplace transform is. And like I said, it is just working backwards. Okay, so let's recall some basic Laplace transforms. So for given like a regular function in terms of t, we Laplace transform it to become a function of s. And so here's some basic Laplace transforms we've seen already and done in previous videos through examples. So make sure to check this out, be familiar with it. And so we're going to use this table, utilize it to be able to find some inverse Laplace transforms. Okay, so we'll get into some examples in some couple of videos, but for this video, I just want to introduce with the inverse Laplace transform and reintroduce this table so that we have it handy for us to use. Okay, so that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, take care.